the ability to produce your own food gives you sovereignty and it gives you freedom. And honestly, our governmental systems are something we absolutely need freedom from. And the more people that are free, we can regain our freedom back from we're really in a tyrannical situation now.
Hello and welcome back to this week's episode on the Pebbleton Post. I'm your co-host, Paige Goodger, and I'm joined by Josh Lake and Marjorie Wildcraft today. Marjorie Wildcraft is the female leader of the survival and preparedness movement. In 2009, she founded the Grow Network, which is a community of people focused on modern, self-sufficient living. She's been featured on National Geographic as an expert in off-grid living. She hosted the Mother Earth News online homesteading summit, and she is listed in Who's Who in America for having inspired hundreds of thousands of backyard gardens. Marjorie was the focus of an article that won Reuters' Food Sustainability Media Award, and she recently authored The Grow System, the essential guide to modern self-sufficient living, from growing food to making medicine. So thank you so much, Marjorie, for being on today. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Wow. It's been so many years and I guess you accumulate stuff. So I'm like, wow, who is that woman? I remember that. I remember that. I did that. Yeah.
Well,
I know. And you have such
good.
You have such an extensive resume, Marjorie. It's really incredible the things you've done. And so, we have a bunch of questions and a bunch of things we want to dive into with you today. But, before we get into all that specifically, would you be able to give just a little bit of context about how you got into the whole sustainable preparedness space for our audience?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I did not grow up in some kind of hippie commune or something like that, or with survivalist parents at all. Grew up in a subdivision in North Miami, Florida. And my first degree is in electrical engineering. And I always wanted to live overseas and managed to land a job managing a couple of cellular telephone networks in Hong Kong. And while I was there, I was always interested in money because my family, we kind of hovered around the poverty line. So, a lot of times children of families like that are like, oh, I'm doing better than my parents, right? And so it was this guy named Robert that was offering some class. So a friend of mine invited me and I said, what do you know about this guy? We don't know. He was like brand new. And I said, well, I'll go anyway. Why not? And this guy just like blew my mind with his concepts of money and how it worked. It wasn't anything you're going to ever learn in school. And it so inspired me. I ended up leaving engineering and creating a real estate investment business, moved back to Austin, Texas, and getting married and having kids and doing this professional investing. And the business was so successful that Robert asked me if I would be a lead testimonial on his infomercials for Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And it was Robert Kiyosaki. So, we were doing really well, lots and lots of mostly passive income coming in from real estate. And I was volunteering on a project to get locally grown food into a local elementary school, Red Rock Elementary. And that project was a complete and utter failure. And it absolutely, I'll never forget that night. It changed my life entirely. And that night was the fateful night. We were meeting in the community center, with the rickety folding chairs and the flickering fluorescent light and all that. And but we didn't care. We're so excited. Because there's grant money, federal money, state money. The PTA wanted it. The students even wanted, everybody wanted this. And that night was when we went to put pen to paper to write down who would be the farmers that would provide these vegetables. And it turned out that there were not enough organic farmers in all of Bastrop County, and Texas has some big counties, to provide even part of the vegetables for one small rural elementary school. And when that dawned on, I don't know where, everybody just disappeared. The whole project fell apart and I could not stop shaking. I mean, for hours, I was just literally convulsing because I knew there's only 4 days worth of food supply in the grocery stores. The food comes in just in time trucking from 1,500 miles away. And I'm surrounded by 20 million Texans who are armed to the teeth. And this is not a good scenario when you're a young mom with children and there's no food out in the countryside. I mean, when you live in the city, whether you're going to admit it or not, like you probably aren't going to admit it, but you're thinking if anything bad happens, we'll go out into the countryside and, steal from the farmers, right? There's nothing out there to steal, right? And I said, okay. So I sold my real estate business, and I've got to learn how to grow food and teach other people how to grow food. And we have to absolutely rebuild the entire food system from the ground up, literally from the backyard up. And so I just became a crazy woman figuring out how do you grow food under all kinds of conditions. And I took a lot of heat for it because this was, now, almost 20 years ago. And I lost friends and family. They said, crazy, Marjorie. You're absolutely insane. This is the United States of America. Like, we're never going to have empty shelves in our grocery stores. We're never going to have supply chain problems. And I'm like, it could happen. It could happen. And I freaked out. So if you're freaked out while you're watching this and you're like deeply concerned, and you should be, and if you're having a problem sleeping, cold sweats at night and panic attacks, I've been there. And I will tell you what healed me and what is a healing journey. And that is taking control of what you can control. And that is being able to grow food. The mystery and the magic and the wonder of this whole thing, the saving grace, is you can grow food. You can do it. And for me, it's been the most wonderful healing journey ever, not only on the physical level from allergies and all kinds of things that were bothering me, but emotionally, I am not concerned about the collapse that we're involved in. Mentally, you are sharper and more intelligent when you eat higher quality food. And then at the spiritual level, there's all kinds of, we won't get into this because most people are still trying to deal with the survival level, but I'll tease you with it. But you're dealing directly with forces of creation with your hands. And I'm going to tell you that magical and mystical and wonderful things start to happen. So I started teaching people. First of all, I learned, I took every class and learned how to grow food. And then I just started teaching people in my yard, and everybody was like, you got to take this out to a wider audience. So we made a DVD, and the first one was called Grow Your Own Groceries. And I thought, good, the DVD's made. I'll be able to go back to, in my garden and everything. And no, that's not what happens. Then I didn't realize it at that moment. I was like a digital marketer. And so I ended up building a whole organization with other products. And I was like, oh yeah, we really do need to know how to treat antibiotics without infections. Or, oh yeah, people really do need to know, roadkill. It's actually edible. And how do you process that? Or, oh my God, how do you forage in Wildcraft? How do you identify plants? Or how do you make home medicine? How do you treat things at home when the drugstores are closed? So one thing kept leading to another, and now I have a whole organization. So that's how the Grow Network got started.
And your organization, the Grow Network, is immense. We have been lucky enough to take a look into it, and I have it up on the screen right now for all you guys tuning in. There's so much information in here that Marjorie and her team has worked so hard to produce. And if you guys are interested in learning more about all of this, please give that a look, because you're going to learn so much. It's an incredible resource for all of this, especially as we're moving into some kind of, uncertain times at the moment, it seems. And that's, partly why we're really excited to bring you on here, is because there was an article that we came across recently. Let me see if I can find it real quick, where we were really shocked to hear what they had to offer. I have it right here. It was the Wall Street Journal published this in February, and it was titled, "To Save Money, Maybe You Should Skip Breakfast." And in a pretty ridiculous statement, in my opinion, but that's about where the times are. And the article goes on to say that, egg prices have increased by 8.5% from the month of January. And then over the last year, 70.1% over the past year. And this is the highest annual rate since 1973. And, just this article alone, I feel like it got a lot of pushback, but which I appreciated. But at the same time, highlighted one of the major issues that we're seeing right now with our own supply chain, our own food production power here in the States. And, that's something that you foresaw. And that's something that you knew could happen, and we're starting to see happen today. And so that's why Paige and I are so excited to have you on right now and ask you a couple of questions regarding, some techniques that we can use today in order to prepare ourselves, get ourselves ready in case, the times do get a little more dire, and everything you just mentioned, how it is so empowering to be able to control your own food supply and your own connection to your food source. And so, today we'd love to talk to you a little bit about specifically eggs, because that's the topic of that article and something that, Paige and I both consume every day. And, it's a huge staple in the American diet. And so, would you mind just diving into a little bit how to get started with that?
Absolutely. And I'd also like to paint the backdrop of we are headed into a global famine. And the calorie will become the next unit of currency. I know we're going to have cryptos and gold and silver and all that, but calories are going to be a currency. And I know calorie has kind of been a bad word for oh, no, I want low calorie, no, you're going to change your mind on that real fast. At that free webinar, it was a Pebbleton Farms food.
Yes.
.com. Anyway, I go into a very simple system on how to grow at least half of your own food in a backyard size space. And the first thing I start out with is a small flock of chickens because they are, it's like the easiest food source for your average person who doesn't know anything. Maybe they're older, they're out of shape. It's the easiest food source to get going. And in fact, you can get it going in just like 2 or 3 weekends. You could be having breakfast for you every day. An average laying hen produces about 250 eggs a year. So the hens do need a little time off from time to time. They do a thing called molting, which is where they drop all their feathers and grow new feathers and kind of rearrange the whole feather situation. I'll worry about that the next time I incarnate as a chicken. And then also, if it gets too cold for them or too hot, they're not going to produce as well. But on average, about 250 eggs a year. And I really recommend people, by the way, everybody, I know I did this, you're panicking, you're freaking out, and you're like, I got to produce for my family and my neighbors and my in-laws. And you're thinking, I got to have this gigantic farm. And I really just stop that impulse right now. Just start with something small and manageable, because the bigger it gets, the more, you're trying to learn a whole new set of skills, and the bigger of a failure you're going to have, basically. So 6 hens, and there's a reason why I recommend 6 for the beginning. First of all, 6 hens, 250 eggs a year, that's 1,500 eggs a year. Wow. And if you think about that, that's going to be 3 egg omelets for you every morning, 365 days a year, plus 33 dozen eggs to barter or trade, use in other recipes. And an egg is a complete food source. It's a cell, basically, that goes from being this slimy thing into a chick with legs and eyes and a heart and wings. It has all the nutrients and everything needed to go from that slimy state into being an actual little bird. So all the nutrients in there, the macronutrients, the carbohydrates, the fats, the protein, and then all the micronutrients are in there. And when you eat that, you're getting all of that. And so it's a complete food. It's a wonderful food to start out with. And I also recommend 6. I don't think you should have less, because first of all, they're flocking creatures, and a flocking creature, they know everybody loves chicken. It's not just Colonel Sanders, it's your local fox. You should not ask, do I have raccoons? You should ask, where is my nearest raccoon, right? Mm-hmm. Snakes, dogs, everything loves to eat chicken, including us. And they know that, and they know that they are a prey species, basically. And so one of them is always going to kind of be on alert, looking around, while the others are maybe pecking around and scratching. And that there's somebody always doing security or sentry duty. And if you have 1 out of 6, then, what is that, like 15% of the time or something like that? Whereas if you have 2 hens, then like 50% of the time. And if you have 1 hen, the poor thing is going to be neurotic, right? They like, they like to be in a group. So 6 is a good amount to start with. You build a coop and a run. The plans we show you the plans in the webinar. And it really can just fit in the size of a parking spot, really. I think it's like 8 by 12 or something like that. You want to let them get out in the yard from time to time, peck around and get some grass. Electric fencing has been an incredible innovation for homesteaders and small backyard farmers. So you can manage them, like where they go and where they don't. But yeah, they'll be in that coop and start laying eggs. And I also recommend, I know it sounds sexy to get baby chicks and raise them up. And I've done that many times, a wonderful homeschooling project to do, but we don't have time for that right now. A laying hen, it takes about 5 to 6 months for her to get to maturity to lay. And also the skills and equipment you need to go from baby chick to laying hen is different from housing 6 laying hens and taking care of them. So although it sounds romantic, really recommend hit up, Craigslist or the local Tractor Supply or, different, Facebook groups or whatever. And just buy 6 laying hens that have just started, like 6-month-old laying hens. After you've built the coop, don't buy them before the coop. And, once you've gotten there, it'll take a little while for them to settle in, but really, it'll take you a weekend or 2 to build the coop or hire somebody to build the coop, get the hens in, get them adjusted. I mean, really, in just in a couple of weeks, you can be having breakfast every morning.
That's so awesome that it's it's such a quick turnaround time, and you could really be a sustainable, autonomous person away from the current food supply with just a couple hens. So, do you need a rooster in this whole
That's
process?
a great question. Yeah, no, you do not need a rooster, and in fact, I do not recommend a rooster at all, especially if you live near neighbors. And
Be the favorite neighbor.
if you do get a rooster, I recommend that if you join the club of those of us who are determined that if it crows at 4 a.m, it's enchiladas. Like, we're trying to get rid of that. The hens will lay eggs just fine without a rooster. Now, if you want those eggs to hatch and turn into little baby chicks, which is not what you're doing right now, then yes, you do need a rooster. And the way you can tell if an egg has been fertilized is if it comes from a flock that has roosters. When you break the egg open, sometimes you may not have seen it from the commercial eggs, of course, because they don't have roosters. But if you ever bought farmers market eggs and they had a rooster, there'll be it's almost like a little speck of looks like a little speck of blood, a little red thing there, and that's actually where the the semen, the egg is just an ovary. Or an ovum. It's where the semen and that's where the the DNA connection was made, and that's actually where the little baby chick is going to start, right there at that. But you don't need to have a rooster.
Well,
That's
that's good
awesome.
to know.
Our neighbors will definitely appreciate the no rooster.
Yes.
How about when it comes to food and the feed? Is there a specific type? Does it have to be like organic or come from a certain source?
The organic standards have been so usurped by the USDA, and I love Joel Salatin, who's a wonderful, wonderful regenerative farmer, and he calls it the US duh. Duh. And I'm like, yeah, right on, Joel. He's a commercial farmer, so he kind of always, he's like, people ask me, why don't I get in commercial farming? I'm like, because it is really different from people growing in. You can do whatever you want in your backyard mostly, right? Commercial farmers start getting into the US duh and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, the organic standards really are usually too expensive and onerous for a lot of organic farmers. A lot of them don't use it. It's been usurped by big industry, and there's often a big price tag associated with organic feed. What I found is really, really good is just if you can find a non-soy, non-GMO, non-corn GMO type feed, very likely that was grown by farmers who are really, truly farming with organic intent. Also, and I do agree with Joel Salatin, is, do let them get out on the grass every now and then, and fresh greens, also your old vegetable scraps and things, is a blood cleanser. So if there is something in the feed, taking in fresh greens is going to help those chickens process it. So I would just say find a good regional non-GMO, non-soy feed. You definitely want to stay away from the cheap feed store feed, the cheap GMO corn, because why are you raising your own? I know we're doing it for food sovereignty, but don't go feeding your chickens crap and then expecting magic. You really want to feed them well. By the way, you can produce all the chicken feed that you need for your chickens. And in the webinar, when you sign up, we'll give you a video. My friend Justin Rhodes put together this whole video on how to feed your chickens for free. But don't do that in the beginning. You've got so much to learn. You've got just built a coop, and you've now just bought these birds, and you're now adjusting your schedule to where you're checking on them regularly, and you're figuring out all kinds of stuff. And oh my God, they got out one night, and you now have to get there's all the stuff, right? So just right now, chicken feed is still cheap, right? Go buy some 50-pound bags of feed, store them in a good solid metal trash can with a good tight lid, so that rodents and raccoons and things won't get in there. And do that while you're learning all this other stuff, step by step, go simply. So yes, you do want to know how to grow all your own feed or find it, because when the grocery stores close, the feed stores are going to close. Mm-hmm. And there are a lot of solutions to be able to do that. But in the beginning, buy the feed. Make that one less thing you have to deal with right now, because you got a lot of other things to learn.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, these chickens are animals, and a typical animal is going to have its own waste. And so what do you typically do with this chicken, the chicken poop? Can you reuse that in your growing vehicle?
That's the best part of having chickens. I know that does not excite most people. As you get into regenerative, you want to be cycling the minerals in your backyard. And so in the chicken coop, especially, they poop the most at night. And in your chicken coop, you'll see that design in the webinar. They'll be roosting on their roost, and then they're pooping. And what you really want to do is have either some wood chips or hay or straw or something underneath there. And, once a week or once every 2 weeks, you're going to need to take that out, but you're going to want to, because that turns into the most wonderful compost, which will then power your garden or will power your fruit trees, or, you need those kind of nutrients in your backyard and in your homestead. Yeah, you're going to definitely love that. And by the way, a chicken coop, if it is stinky, then something's wrong. It should not really have an unpleasant smell to it. Throw some more hay in there if it's getting too stinky. Just keep it down, or clean it out. Or your compost piles also, they should not have a really funky smell to them. It should mostly be kind of like a little bit earthy. And if not, that's your cue that something's wrong. Either it needs more browns or it needs more greens, or, so, yeah.
I think that's a common misconception, and everyone thinks it's going to be smelly or stinky. And I like that you pointed out that it should not be if you're doing all the right things.
Yeah. Nobody wants to live in that stink. Not even the chickens,
So when it comes to, the actual process of taking care of the chickens, I'm sure that the webinar lays it out really well, but just right now, just off the top of your head, is there any tools or technology that you think is necessary to have just to get started?
Yeah, well, what I really recommend is that you make these, I call them off-grid waterers. And so as much as you can automate, you should, because just because the world is coming to an end, that does not mean you're going to have more time. The reality of it is you're going to have less time, because there's going to be this breaking and that breaking, right? So we need to automate as much as possible, but I'm very into very simple, low technology automation. And I really recommend like taking a 5-gallon bucket and using a little float valve in a trough to make an automatic waterer. So that, and then and all those things, 5-gallon buckets, and then those float valves, they're in the back of every toilet. These are very simple things. And this is a wonderful project to do with kids on the weekend, is to make a little simple automatic waterer so that the chickens always have water available. And I always recommend redundant watering systems, or redundancy in everything, honestly, so, have a couple of them, because the last thing you do is if you stress your birds in any way, your egg production is going to go down, and being thirsty is definitely a stress. You can do similar things with some of the feeding. Some people use creative, like a 4-inch PVC pipe that kind of comes down where they can put the feed in that, and then the birds have free access to it all the time. We had this wonderful guy one time who had all of his stuff set up on cameras and everything. It was fascinating. And he and his wife would sit in the living room and watch the chickens on their couch on their big screen TV. I'm like, why don't you guys put a lawn chair out there and just watch them in the yard? But what, who am I to bring simple reality into a high school? I will say, in regards to technology, though, I have found game cameras are unbelievably useful. So a game camera to watch your coop at night. By the way, you are going to lose some chickens from time to time. There's those predators have all night, every night to be looking, and they'll find it, whatever it is, and they'll get in and they'll kill a chicken or two. I want you to get over it right now. It happens to everybody, even experienced chicken keepers. Get over that, get some replacements, and keep going. But those game cameras are absolutely fascinating to see what is visiting your coop at night, or what is going on. And you can't pay your brother-in-law to do that.
So you've mentioned a lot of benefits of having chickens. Are there any other benefits? Obviously the entertainment aspect of the chickens, videotaping them and the eggs. But are there any other benefits of chickens? Like, would you ever end up eating these chickens down the road? Anything
Yeah,
like that?
sure. By the way, I wouldn't underestimate the entertainment value. So when we first freaked out, fortunately, my husband was on board with this whole thing, and we moved way out to the countryside, and we were actually living in the barn while we were building the house and building the rainwater containers and planting the orchard, doing all the stuff, right? And we didn't have television, which for me, they were the most wonderful years. Like, it took 4 or 5 years before we got a house and a television. I loved those years. They all got a television as soon as they could. And I was like, no, let's unplug it. Let's not do that. But really, we would sit out in the afternoons when it came time to roost and watch the chickens. And they are hilarious. They really are hilarious. It's just so fun. And then those times as a family watching, and playing with the chickens. Chickens and tending chickens also is excellent work for young children. In fact, historically, children took care of egg collection and took care of the chicken coop. What more meaningful work than, your boy or your girl to be responsible for collecting the eggs and making sure the chickens are okay. They're doing something incredibly meaningful. Usually by the time they're teenagers, you've kind of gone too far. But if you can catch them young enough and get them into that, I think that's one of the biggest things missing in our culture now, is real meaningful work for kids. And they need that so that they do meaningful work when they're adults, Yeah. Yes, you do eat them when they get older. I tend to really procrastinate with that part, and most people do. By the way, a laying hen, the industry will only have them for about 2.5 years before they're like, okay, they're done. Most homesteaders, and we're a lot more forgiving. And what happens is they just don't lay every day. They kind of start laying less and less, but you become real attached to them and you don't mind. And, it kind of goes on. Older chicken meat, the older meat has a flavor to it that used to be very, very highly prized. And all of us are so used to eating very young meat. In fact, the industry, as soon as they can get it up to weight, they sell it to you. We haven't got that taste, but there's a richness of flavor. There's a richness of texture. And older hens make like the giblet sauces that are just, like, the gourmet. Like it's incredible, the flavors. So yes, you do. And that is a thing, the cycle of life and learning about that.
I didn't know about that flavor of the older hens, and I'm curious to go try that now if we can get our hands on some. And I know that also another benefit to not just providing food for yourself in this process is being able to share that with your community. Because if you have enough, it sounds like you'll have plenty of eggs to be giving out or bartering or however you want, selling them. And I know that's something that even Paige's mom, Amy and Bix, they've been starting to barter with their neighbor who has a chicken coop and who has a surplus of eggs. And so I know that there's another economic value to this whole process as well. So that's something really cool. And I think that people who are interested and have the space to provide this in the community to share with would be interested in. And one of the questions that I have now is, as you can see, Paige is in an apartment as well as I am, and at least in a different room of the same apartment. And so one of the questions
I
I
was
have,
wondering.
one of the questions I have is around people like us who are
Mhm.
currently in the city, currently limited on space. Is there any hope for us when it comes to having a chicken coop?
Yes, there is. So if you're in an apartment, a quail are another very viable option. Now, the eggs are obviously going to be a little bit smaller. And I'm actually just about to shoot a video with a woman that I've been working with here for the past, I don't know, year or so. And I got her set up with a quail cage and some quail, and she's been growing them in her house. And we're just about to make some content all around that. But quail are just like little bitty chickens. And she has 8 of them in the living room, and they pretty much produce 8 eggs a day, which, quail eggs, that's going to be the equivalent of breakfast for you, honestly. Um, and again, if you're keeping up with the maintenance on it, there's no real smell to it. She's taking care of that. And then also they just kind of have a delightful little, they're not really particularly noisy, or, the sound isn't horrible. They're not exactly songbirds, but they're not, it's not grating or anything. They're just nice birds to have doing their little thing. And for her, the exciting thing of it is, the massive amount of compost that she's, materials to make compost. Because even if you're living in an apartment, you're going to want to compost is super, super, super valuable. Even if you're in an apartment, you need to be making compost. If nothing else, you can sell it. It's we have to be thinking more and more about recycling minerals, which is a part of what that is. By the way, there's a lot more things you can do in an apartment, but you can definitely have a little egg production going on there.
Yeah, I love that. And, in San Diego, we have local gardens where, each neighbor can buy a plot and you can share food with neighbors. And so I know that the composting, that would also help. You can give it to your local community garden and help out that way. So I have a question, because I think, the chickens are in their environment, obviously, and like eating from their environment. So in Ohio, we all know what happened in Ohio recently. So would you eat an egg from Ohio? And what do you do if there is a disaster like that in your area and you're also growing chickens?
Yeah, the dioxin issue, and dioxins like to get bound up in fat molecules. And I would be very, very nervous to eat an egg from Ohio. Actually, Pennsylvania and upstate New York and the whole, what is it, Ontario region of that whole area. We just don't know. And there's just testing. Are they testing? Are they not testing? Is this some kind of land grab? Is it, what is it? And it's actually had a whole bunch of us rethinking our, I'm like, friends of mine are in Tennessee, and they thought, they're living about by the national forest, and they thought, well, we're hunkered down. We're just going to skim through this. And now they're like, oh my God, that they could do that anywhere. And we need to think about having to bug out and leave everything. That's really tough because, right, a lot of preps and a lot of things are all about having stuff, right? You're fencing your chicken coop, your chickens, your livestock, and everything. So skills obviously always trump stuff, but oh my God, now I use the word trump. Skills are always better than stuff. But no, I would not eat an egg from Ohio. And we have a lot more testing to do, and there's a lot more to unfold from that whole disaster. How big of an area is toxic, and how was it mismanaged or intentionally managed to be mismanaged? There's, when you get into the whole conspiracy theory thing, which ends up being just a theory a couple of years later, and in fact, I don't know if I'm turning cynical or realistic or what. I don't know what's true anymore. But yeah.
I agree with you, and I hate to say it, but I do think that there has been either intentional mismanagement or intentional collusion or conspiracy to put a strain on the average citizen in America and elsewhere. And one of the easiest ways, historically and in present day, is to do it through the food supply, the food chain or the supply chain. And I don't know if there's enough proof out there yet to really point fingers, but I do know that there is something that we can do regardless of what's going on. And that's to get prepared. That's to learn these skills. That's to build a community around you that you can rely on and that you can help support as we go through this, because we're going to need each other. We're going to need ourselves to be ready to go, because we can't rely on, other powers that be or other organizations or governments to come in and save us if they're potentially the ones who are hoping we get into situations like that. And that's getting a little into the woo-woo and the conspiracy, but that's part of this channel as well, that we like to explore those avenues of thought. So that's, if anything, if you guys are listening at home, just know that there are things that you can do. There are ways to get prepared. And one of the best ways to do that is to go through the education that Marjorie provides. And I'll bring it up again. We have a special link to the webinar that is going to be able to really get you started on how to begin this process. If you're still new to homesteading, if you're still new to your own production of food and medicine, this is a great place to start. Go to pebbletonfarms.com and you'll find the webinar there where Marjorie will walk you through so much. Is there anything specific that you want to bring up or regarding that link and what they'll find there?
Yeah, what we'll do, when you go there, and it's a free webinar, and I'll show you a very simple 3-part system. One part is the chickens, on how to produce at least half of your own food in the size of about 3 parking spots. And I'm assuming that you know nothing and that you're older, you're out of shape. Like, these systems are set up for even women and children type situations. And that's what the Grow Network has always been about. Growing half, and I've spent years like, what is the easiest way for somebody who doesn't know anything but like an average American, what kind of resources you can have, either just from building materials or finding stuff. How can you do this? And I've spent years drilling this down and taking it into small bite-sized chunks, step by step, so that you can do it. And when you take the webinar, you'll walk away knowing how to produce half of your own food, what to get started with immediately. Like, you can start actionable steps right away, what to implement. And then you'll have a plan for the next foreseeable futures, for not only producing half, but then after that, so many other wonderful opportunities available. There are actually a tremendous amount of ways to produce food, and we tap into that also.
That's so wonderful. And thank you so much for offering such amazing work and doing the work yourself to bring this to the community at large and the world. I really hope that everyone takes advantage of the link and this opportunity to learn how to grow their own food, how to become sustainable, and how to live a sovereign life that's outside of our current system right now.
Yeah, if I can just say one parting thing is, first of all, the ability to produce your own food gives you sovereignty and it gives you freedom. And honestly, our governmental systems are something we absolutely need freedom from. And the more people that are free, we can regain our freedom back from we're really in a tyrannical situation now. The other thing is, I think you'll, even though it's kind of scary and you got this learn and you're worried and da da da, you'll look back on this and you'll go, oh my God, that was the best thing that ever happened to me. I look back on that night in Red Rock and I go, that was the best thing that ever happened to me. Because, I love growing my own food. It's so rewarding. It's so delicious, but it's so empowering. And, even if we weren't going to have, the apocalypse, I would still be growing my own food. It's just an incredible, healthy activity. So you will look back on this and go, wow, that was actually really great.
Absolutely. And again, Marjorie, we thank you so much for coming on and spreading your wealth of knowledge. Thank you so much for just being one of the true, warriors in this fight for freedom and sovereignty, and doing it with such an amazing attitude and just providing such a great service to so many people. I know tons of people in your network have been touched and their lives have changed because of this information. So we're really excited to bring that to the audience that we're building here. And again, if you guys are tuning in, please go check out pebbletonfarms.com. That's where you can find the webinar. That's where you can really start your journey on becoming more sovereign in terms of your own food and medicine production. And there's so many other incredible things on the Grow Network, so make sure you go check that out too. But until then, Marjorie, we'd love to have you on again. We'd love to continue these conversations with you because you just have so many other really cool perspectives that we'd love to pick your brain over, beyond just the food and beyond just the homesteading sides of things. But we just appreciate you so much, and so thank you for coming on. And yeah, with that, Paige, is there anything else that you want to leave us with?
Yeah, just thank you so much for coming on, and be sure to check out pebbletonfarms.com and also the Grow Network. Tons of information there, and I'm really excited to dig into the medicine side of things on our next chat. And yeah, we will see you soon.
Bye, everybody.